Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, where today we're going to be speaking about our Healthy Hedgerows survey that we've been building in partnership with the People's Trust for Endangered Species. For those that have not met me, my name's Dan. I'm one of the directors of LandApp, and I've been working alongside Megan, who's also joined me, who I'll introduce in a moment, to try and make this partnership a reality. As per usual, this is a live webinar, which means that you'll all remain on mute and your camera will remain off. But that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. We have the Q&A function now live on Zoom. So you should be able to see a little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to ask any questions throughout the webinar, and we will have a dedicated Q&A session at the end. You also can upvote those questions. So if you want to keep an eye on the Q&A and anything in particular that's resonating with yourself, you can give it a thumbs up, and we will prioritize those with the most votes. We are recording this session, so we will be sharing that with everyone that's registered, and it usually takes us by Monday afternoon or Tuesday to get it up onto our YouTube channel. And finally, we have a short feedback survey, both from ourselves at LandApp, but also from the People's Trust for Endangered Species, for you to fill out when you leave. And that's either if you have to leave early or at the end of the session. So the agenda today is we've got an hour to explore healthy hedgerows, both the practicalities of using the tool, but also a bit more about hedges themselves. And at that point, I will be introducing Megan. We also are going to be doing a bit of a live walkthrough of the tool, where we can explain a bit more about the tool itself, its use case, and how you can start both assessing those hedges, but also receiving some bespoke management advice from the People's Trust for Endangered Species. There'll also be, as I say, time for a Q&A at the end, where we can hopefully hear from you all and look forward into the future. So just like this webinar, lots of recordings are up on our YouTube channel, so we may not be covering everything that you want to know today. I would recommend going to YouTube, searching LandApp, and we've got a whole host of webinars or short videos or tutorials that you can use, covering a whole range of different topics, from just general training, our new data collection app that's part of the wider LandApp mobile profile, but also things like sustainable farming incentive, countryside stewardship as well. What I always like to do before we dive into the topics is just give our users a bit of an update on what we've been up to at LandApp. So we have released some September updates, which include the Healthy Hedgerows, along with a couple of other points that would be worth just touching on now. The first one to say is we have a new SFI validator live, and that's for our standard and our professional users to check their SFI 24 application, just to make sure you've not made any obvious mistakes against the scheme rules. So that might be, for example, picking up if you put an option that's meant to be in grassland in an arable field. And so it just flags those potential mistakes. But just to reiterate, it's not going to do the whole work for you. It's just trying to pick up any obvious errors. We've also made a couple of updates to the printing functions. So a popular feature of ours is creating nice, clean prints. And the main one is just the way that we style the legend. If anyone is using that, we'll just include both the feature name and the feature code. So it won't just say flower margins, it will say AB8 flower margins if you're printing a countryside stewardship plan. And then finally, we've also released some new data layers. The one I've chosen for the image is we just updated the styling for listed buildings. So it used to be just one color for every type of listed building, but each of the different grades have got their own color. And the other thing we've done is we've separated out England and Wales from Scotland. Just simply the way that the listed buildings are hosted and graded is slightly different in Scotland than it is in Wales. So you can search in the data layer library for listed buildings and see both those layers. We've also released an agroforestry layer from the Rural Payments Agency for the Sustainable Farm Incentive. And this just shows where in England people can apply for agroforestry payments. So they've released some new low density agroforestry options under the Sustainable Farm Incentive, and you can check your eligibility with that layer. And then finally, we've got a new Historic England data set, which is Heritage at Risk from 2023. And this just looks at some of the key heritage features in the landscape that are most at risk for a whole number of reasons. So delighted to be joined by Megan, who's going to be firstly speaking to you all a bit more about hedgerows and about the People's Trust for Endangered Species. So Megan, passing over to you.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, I'm Megan. Officially, I'm the Key Habitats Officer at People's Trust for Endangered Species, but unofficially, I'm known as the hedgerow geek because actually I spend most of my time looking at hedgerow wildlife and hedgerow management. So People's Trust for Endangered Species, we're a conservation charity working to bring the most threatened species back from the brink. And among our key UK species, we have the hazel dormice, hedgehogs, and dead wood beetles. So hedges obviously are a clear priority for us. Unfortunately, we think we've lost about 50% of our dormouse population since the year 2000, and about the same in our rural hedgehog populations, which are just two of the many species that rely on our hedgerow network. And of course, there are several factors that contribute to these declines. It's obviously not just about hedges, but knowing that these species and so many others rely on hedges in good structural condition, making sure we provide that healthy network can be a lifeline. But actually, it's actually not just about these flagship species. The closer you look at a hedgerow, the more important you realise they are. They provide a home, food, shelter, and safe travel. They're the green corridors connecting up our countryside. And the brilliant Robert Walton of the Devon Hedge Group found 2,070 different species in one 85-metre stretch of hedge on his farm in Devon. And given that was the first time and only time, I believe, that any such survey has been done on hedges, just imagine how that could scale up, how much they could support nationwide. Hedges certainly punch well above their weight as a habitat, considering the sort of the modest land use footprint that they have. And of course, we've actually got a lot to thank the farming community for when it comes to hedges. Hedges are a man-made, or maybe I should say man-shaped habitat. And it's centuries of farming that has led to this wonderful network of hedges that we see today. And we know managing hedges isn't always easy. But for centuries, we've done just that. We've carefully nurtured them regardless, because it turns out healthy hedges are an asset to our farms. It's why we've had them for almost as long as we've been farming here. They provide shade, shelter, biosecurity, and diverse browse, all becoming increasingly essential for the high welfare and climate resilient livestock farming that we pride ourselves in. They protect soils from erosion. They provide pollinators, natural pest control. They sequester carbon in their biomass and the surrounding soils. They can help reduce flooding, filter pollutants, stopping them reaching watercourses. At the end of the day, they are, and they've pretty much always been, much, much, much more valuable than their role in just keeping the cows in. And that's what I love about hedges. They offer us such huge potential, no matter what we need them for. But they do this no more so when they're managed well. And in a nutshell, hedgerow management, because it can be quite diverse, comprises of two main elements: rejuvenation and routine management. So the rejuvenation, this is things like coppicing and hedge laying. Now, this is essential to every hedge to reset their succession as they mature past that sort of peak condition. It needs to happen every 30 or 40 years and is pretty much a non-negotiable with hedges. Hedges will slowly die without periodic rejuvenation. Now, routine management, this is what we do to hedge in the in-between years, between rejuvenation events. So with wildlife in mind, this might include cutting hedges higher and wider each time, or maybe every 2, 3, or 4 years, so that they produce blossom and berries and it slows their structural decline. But it also might mean doing nothing to a hedge for a number of years. You could have them in a lay, leave, lay cycle, for example. And from my perspective, good hedge management tends to require a mix of both these approaches. And there are various combinations that can offer a huge amount of flexibility for your hedge management. So I would say with a bit of experimentation, you can find a combination of these management approaches that works better for your farm, better for your hedges, and might even save you money. And of course, we don't actually need to manage all of our hedges in the same way either. Some hedges might benefit from a coppice cycle. Potentially hedges they're a bit of a pain to trim. One's on a steep hill or a soggy area, which means we don't need to necessarily trim them so often. And others might benefit from a slower trimming cycle, maybe where the sightlines are important by roadsides or where space is at a premium. In fact, I would actually say that taking a mixed approach to our hedge management might not only make it easier for us, but actually could benefit wildlife as well. Because actually all of these different methods of managing hedges create subtly different shape, sizes, density, structure hedgerows. And of course, that diversity of hedge is much better for attracting a diversity of wildlife. So we've essentially been managing hedgerows on this life cycle pretty much as long as we've had hedges. But understandable changes in the way we farmed post-war meant that we've largely sort of broken with that tradition over the last sort of 60 odd years. And some of the knowledge behind this life cycle approach is no longer as commonplace as it used to be. So whilst farming might have changed in the recent years, I'd say the needs of our hedges hasn't. So we think there's a place for some speedy and accessible management advice to help there. And brilliantly, we know that just by tweaking the way we manage our hedges, we have the potential to see some rapid and extensive positive change for wildlife, for the environment, and for our farming. All of this with little to no extra encroachment on the land area that feeds us. I'm a girl that likes at least 3 meals a day. So we've already got over 400,000 kilometres of managed hedgerow in England. The infrastructure, the footprint, it's already there. We just need to work out how to make it reach its potential. Next slide, please. So that's the inspiration behind this Healthy Hedgerows survey. It's a tool to help farmers document the condition of their hedges, as well as understand what management options would be best placed to improve them going forward, depending on what life stage they're already in. There's a saying that goes, you can't improve what you don't measure, and I definitely subscribe to that. The first thing to say is that this survey is best done in winter. When a hedge is covered in leaves, it can be really difficult to see the condition of the structure below. So we actually want these hedges all naked and skeletal for this. The next is to say that this survey is deliberately short. It's just 6 essential questions. We know the farming community is rich in hedgerows, but not always rich in spare time. And with this survey, it's really efficient. So when you really get into it, it can take as little as 2 minutes or something to do each hedgerow. I've actually done this from a quad bike to help me get around a whole farm. And once you've drawn your hedge on a map, which I'm sure Dan will show later, we get onto these 6 essential questions. So 5 of them are a fairly simple matter. We estimate the height, estimate the width, estimate the base canopy, which is a sort of rough measure of how leggy they're getting, and the length of any gap, and then a quick count of the trees. The most difficult, but probably the most important, is you need to work out which structure best represents your hedge. And for this, you can choose one of the 12 illustrations based on the Adams Code, which I've got shown here on the slide. And each of these illustrations have a description that goes with them. So the Adams Code is a way of determining the life stage of your hedge. And it's a system that was expertly masterminded by a chap called Nigel Adams. And it's key to understanding how we should manage that hedge going forward. The Adams Code comes in 4 main categories. And the top line of the illustrations shown in this slide demonstrate hedges that maybe have been trimmed to the same height for a little bit too long, slightly over-managed hedges. The second line are hedges that are in their prime of life, so dense and well-managed. The next one shows hedges that are perhaps getting a bit too mature, maybe they've run up a little bit, or they're getting a bit overstood, maybe likely needing rejuvenation. And then the last line, the one at the bottom there, that's the ones that showing hedges in the start of their news cycle. So those that have been rejuvenated by laying or coppicing, or maybe they've just been planted. So when I'm surveying, I tend to start by narrowing down the hedge that I'm looking at into one of these 4 broad categories: over-trimmed, dense and well-managed, overstood, or recently rejuvenated. And then you've just got a choice of 3 different structures to decide on. And that's where the image descriptions come in really helpful. Once all this is done, it gets put on the map layer as a record of that current condition, and you can choose to then get that bespoke management advice using the toolkit, which Dan will demonstrate shortly. Next slide, please. So why are we surveying hedges in the first place? Well, for a start, we can actually now be paid to survey hedges under the SFIs. So the SFI Hedgerow Assessment Action, CHRW1, is a new approach from the government. And actually, I think this is fantastic. It's the first time that farmers are being paid, and the rates are currently £5 per 100 metres per side of hedge per year to undertake this sort of hedgerow health check. The assumption is that we've all just been doing it for free up until now. So I think it's a really positive step that the government has now got this scheme in there to actually pay for this work to be done. The official aims of this action are to understand the conditions of your hedgerows, meaning that you're able to effectively plan how they can be managed to improve their condition going forward. So I think this survey fits quite well with that. Now, the action requires you to write a written hedgerow condition assessment and update this condition assessment record each year of the action's duration. So how do we do this? Well, the official guidance says it's up to you how to complete this action, as long as you do it in a way that reasonably expected to achieve the action's aim. Very helpful. But actually in the supporting guidance documents, they do actually recommend the Healthy Hedgerows methodology for this. Now, the only catch, as far as I see, is the eligibility requirements, especially around gaps, which states that in eligible hedges, whilst there can be gaps in the hedgerow, they can't be more than 20 metres long, or 10% of the total length of the hedgerow when you add all the gaps together. Now, this is actually the same for all of the hedge actions in the SFIs, the management action and the hedgerow tree action. And whilst at first I thought this was bonkers, as this would rule out quite a number of hedges and potentially those that need this funding the most. But then, of course, I carried on reading, and it goes on to say, even if the gaps add up to more than 10%, you can still do this action on the total length of your hedgerow if you plant up those gaps within that first 3-year agreement. And of course, there are capital grants that you can get to cover this. There is the BN7 Hedgerow Gapping Up Grant. There's the BN11 Planting New Hedges, not to mention the BN5 Hedgerow Laying and the BN6 Hedgerow Coppicing Grants. And this is important because it tends to be that a hedge which is developing extensive gaps actually also needs rejuvenation. And gapping up is also best done, most successfully done, when you're rejuvenating the rest of the hedge around it. It means all of the stage you can manage them better going forward as well. Now, these hedgerow grants, the ones that I've just mentioned, across the board, the rates are better than they've ever been. They actually now make this sort of rejuvenation financially feasible, which is fantastic. And the application system, in theory, makes it much easier to access these capital grants. So again, if there was ever a time to go out and take the opportunity of these grant systems, I would say it's now. I'm optimistic, to be honest. A huge amount can be achieved by changing the way we manage the hedges that we've already got. Hedges are fantastic. They are powerful, they are robust, and luckily for us, they are really quick to respond to restoration and rejuvenation. I would say with a rethink to the way we manage our hedges, support from the SFIs, the capital grants, and helpful tools like the Healthy Hedgerows on the Land app, we can ensure that each of these hedges once again has the potential to support over 2,000 species, as we know they can. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you so much, Megan. I really enjoyed that, and your energy is infectious. So really excited to then talk through the next bit, which is kind of the more technical piece. So how are we going to help you collectively start to understand and take stock of what's currently out there at the moment while accessing these funds? So the first thing to say is that we've built this Healthy Hedgerows tool in line with our recent developments of the Land app mobile. Land app mobile has probably been the most requested feature since Land app started in 2017, and over the last 6 months we've really made waves developing it to make it as bespoke as we can be to help you with in-field mapping. And really to help, some of the key things that we're trying to get across is it helps you save time, you can collaborate on your plans, it uses your GPS of your phone to improve the accuracy of your mapping, so you can take out and go and draw that lapwing plot or that hedge out in the field. And also recently we've added the idea of offline mode. We're very conscious that not everyone has good Wi-Fi or good signal, so you can now take the maps offline, and once you then get connected to Wi-Fi or a signal, then everything resyncs for you. As a note, this Land app mobile is only available to standard or professional users. So that price starts at £10 per user per month, and it's available on both Apple, iOS and Android. So the Healthy Hedgerows assessment that Megan has just said is now fully formatted in Land app, and I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes giving a bit of a demo of both how do you prepare your map for the survey, how do you conduct that survey, And then what I think is the most important bit, and back when I was an advisor at WAG, we would have absolutely loved to have this, is that, you know, that bespoke management advice that comes back to me based on the answers that I put in for the assessment. And so do you really want to spend a bit of time on that management advice. One thing just to add to Megan's point is, just to reiterate, a really key part of the assessment is the RPA guidance and the Healthy Hedgerows guidance does define what is a single hedge. So just to make it clear here, and I've copied this from the People's Trust website, been working with the RPA, is a single hedge isn't the whole circumnavigate of a single field. A single hedge is basically where one hedge meets another one you're surveying on the other side. The gap is no more than 20 meters. So the image on the right-hand side, you can see that there's a single line of hedge, and there's a gap down to the south, and there's also this right angle. This is the single line of hedge that we want you to map. The hedge structure doesn't change dramatically for more than 20 meters, i.e. if there's a significant change in structure, even if it's along the same length, that is a different part of the hedge that you can map with two separate lines. Your hedge finishes if it meets another structure or a wall or a woodland, for example. And if your hedge turns a corner of more than 90 degrees, it's also a new hedge. So, Megan, I hope I got that right. If there's anything else you want to confirm, smiles and thumbs up. Great. So it's just really important that the RPA data that you download sometimes has a right angle in. And so we are introducing the ability for you to split that line in half, and that'll be released in the next couple of weeks. So just bear in mind the definition of the start and the end of the hedge across these 5 bullet points. Okay, so we're going to do a bit of a live demo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to firstly move across to another screen. Hopefully you're all familiar with what the Land App is, but just very quickly, we're at thelandapp.com. We're a web-based mapping platform that you can sign up for free. So we do have a free tier to, you know, you can map hedges, for example, on the desktop, or you can download your RPA field parcels. You can sign up for free by hitting the sign up button. And our website has got lots of lovely content in, from case studies to thought leadership pieces to, you know, articulating some of the key funding opportunities that are out there at the moment. So please, if you've got you know, spare 10 minutes over a copy, have a little click around our website. But for this demo, I'm going to assume you've already registered for the Land App, and therefore we can get into the mapping system. So the first thing to say is when you're doing a hedgerow assessment on Land App Mobile, you do need to create a map within the Land App website. So for an example, I've come onto my map, I've got my map dashboard, I'm hitting new, I'm creating a demo, PTES Hedgerows. I'm going to call this the date, just so I can look organized. And I'm also going to assign it to my farming tag as well and create an empty map. And so as usual, this then drops you down onto an interactive base map, which you can change to a number of different views. I do quite like the Bing imagery satellite. This is enough for you to now log into Land App Mobile if you don't have any data to preload. So as soon as you've done this, when you log into Land App Mobile, you should be able to then see this map created within your account. However, to speed up the process, one of the key bits that our data engineers have been working on is that you can actually import existing data from the Rural Payments Agency. And what you can do is hit import from Rural Payments Agency, and type in your 9-digit SBI number. Not every farmer in England has an SBI number, although those that have been claiming basic payments should. And what this allows you to download is 3 data sets from the RPA. Just for today's demo, I'm going to download my land parcels and my hedges. Land parcels just being the field parcel themselves with a unique ID, and the hedges are where the RPA currently think your hedges are. And I'm just going to say the word think because it is quite an old data set. And I think this is a really nice moment in time for us to try and improve our understanding of the extent and condition of the hedges. You can bring it down into any template for the moment. I'm going to bring it down into the basic payment scheme because what that does is that will just style the hedges in green before I preload it into the Healthy Hedgerow template. So what I've got now, just to quickly show you, is I've got a map with field boundaries that have field IDs in. And I also have all of my hedges where the RPA has drawn them with a field ID associated to them as well. So you can see I've got all these different hedges. And this is kind of my starting point. What I now need to do is I want to tell Land App that I want to complete a healthy hedgerow assessment. And the way that you do that is you hit the 3 dots next to the hedge layer. So you can see it's called hedge control here. You go down into duplicate, and then you need to choose from this list our Healthy Hedgerows survey, which is this template here. I can call this PTES Healthy Hedgerows survey, for example, and create plan. And what that's now done is that is now formatted my hedgerow line I've got here into a plan that can only be edited on Land Mobile. We are currently working to improve this whole stage because we're obviously creating a copy, so bear with us on that. But this basically now means you've got a data layer that I can edit only in my Land Mobile. So it's that preloading that's the important piece. Okay, so that's all you need to do on the desktop. I've downloaded some hedgerow data and I've now got them onto a map and I've then transferred them onto Land Mobile. Now, this is the bit that I just need to make sure I get the tech right. I'm going to share my screen from my mobile device. Share this one, hopefully. Share this one. With this bit of tech, that's the confusing bit. Hopefully you can see a nice skyline of London, and hopefully now, Megan, if you can just come off mute and just let me know if you can see my phone.
Yeah, I can see.
Perfect. What I've done is I've opened up the Land app on my account, and what this is met is with my map homepage. I can do a couple of things to try and find my People's Trust map. The first thing I can do is I can add a filter for the tag that I applied, which was farming. Or if I type in the words PTES, you can see I've got a map that currently got no data in, but it's what I've just created from the 20th of the 9th. So I've searched for that map and I've now found it. And I click enter. And what that then does is that then drops me onto an interactive map. Eagle-eyed viewers will realize that I'm not at the farm that I've just uploaded on the map. I'm actually currently sat in Bristol. But what I want to do is just spend 2 minutes giving you a bit of an orientation of what's available within Land Mobile, and then we'll talk through the Healthy Hedgerow survey. The first thing is we've got a number of different base maps. So it's by default on satellite, but you can change it to things like terrain or road. But obviously for hedgerow mapping and mainly rural mapping, being on satellite is useful. You can navigate it just like you would on any other mapping interface on your phone. So I'm using 2 fingers to scroll around the map. I can search for a location. So I can search in a postcode, or I can search in a town name, or even a what 3 words address, and that will then take me to the particular map. And also within this, the bottom right, you can see I've got a locate button. So I hit that, that just zooms me back to where I am, and that can be turned on and off. And then finally, you've got this plus button that allows you to do a number of things. It allows you to start a survey, which I'll do in a moment with Megan. We're going to have a bit of an interactive session mapping some arbitrary hedges just to show the tool. But we've also got other tools like measure, which allows you to drop points on a map and start measuring distances. We've also got undo and redo buttons at the top that hopefully you can see. Also within there, you can take photos as well, which I'll come on to in a moment, as well as upload existing photos. So if you've already, for example, taken lots of photos of your hedgerows and you just want to upload them to your Healthy Hedgerows survey, you can upload them and link them, which I'll show you in a moment. But the first thing I really wanted to talk through is then that preloaded map that I've created. So I've just scrolled up from the bottom of my screen, and within this demo, you can see the plan details. You can see that I've got 0 photos on the device, but I have got 3 plans, one of which is on the device. And if I click on that, you can see that the plan that's synced to my phone at the moment is that Healthy Hedgerow survey that I've just created on the Land app website. If I click on that file, what it does is it then zooms me onto the map of where this one is in Surrey, of those hedgerows that the RPA has provided me. And so by preloading them, and Megan, I like the image of driving around on a quad bike, I could now navigate to each one of these hedges and complete those 6 easy questions through this template. So for example, and Megan, let's just assume I can actually see from the satellite. I think this is actually a pretty good hedge, but I'm just going to basically click on the shape. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to do a couple of things. the first thing is you can redraw it. So if you disagree that that hedge is either, it could be multiple hedges based on the definition, or that it's missed some nuance in the hedgerow, you can redraw it. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to create a new hedgerow of either that similar condition or structure, or maybe just to improve the quality of it. I'm just going to go back because actually I don't want to do that. The next thing you can do is you can hit this assign button. And what this then does is this then opens up a little menu at the bottom of your screen based on those Adam codes structures that Megan was just speaking through. So Megan, I'm going to come over to you. If this is let's say this is a good condition hedge, what would we expect? When it's fenced and managed, I can obviously look through.
Let's call this an H6 hedge. For the very brief bit we saw, it looked like a nice H6.
Perfect. So what I've done is I've just chosen the H6 dense and managed. And then now at the bottom, I've got this form that I have to fill out for this particular hedge. So the first thing I can give it is a name. Let's just call this good hedge. I can add a description if you'd like. So that could be seen a dormouse, which could be good, maybe. And then following that, we've got 5 more questions that Megan hinted at, which help us understand a bit more about this hedge. So the first one is total gap. And within the question mark, you get a bit more information from the Healthy Hedgerows survey about what defines a gap, how to best quantify the gap. And there's also an image at the bottom of that screen. So Megan, what would I expect for a total gap of a good condition hedge?
Well, ideally, we're expecting no gaps at all. And I'm going to say, let's give this one a 0 gap.
Perfect. Okay. So 0 gap. So I've added that. Number of trees, again, there's a little...
give it 3, maybe. Oh, sorry, jumping ahead.
No, it's okay. No worries. So yeah, 3 is good. Base canopy height?
Per se, maybe 0.2. That's 0.2 of a meter, by the way, so 20 centimeters.
2. Yep, perfect. And then average width?
Let's do maybe 2 to 3 meters.
2 to 3 meters. And then average height?
Maybe 3 to 4 meters.
3 to 4 meters. Okay. So what we've just completed that form in, well, obviously we've got Megan here, which is helping to basically fill out all of these different elements of this form. Some of them will be pre-populated. So for example, the sheet ID and parcel ID is already populated. Obviously the created app. And at the bottom of the screen, there is this get management advice, which we will come on to later. At the moment, this is just a little tooltip to remind you that once you've completed your assessment, there is a way of you accessing advice about that hedge, which I will come on to later. But we're just trying to make it as easy as possible to understand the process. The feature should automatically save. So now basically I've got a good hedge with all those different features contained within. What I want to do now, Megan, is let's go and find an arbitrary, that would look quite thick. I don't know where, over here, this is quite a bad hedge, for example. So we've got a couple of things. Firstly, the RPA does look like it's mapped that at right angle correctly. So should we just quickly whistle through what a bad hedge might look like in terms of its structure first?
Absolutely. Let's assign this one an H2. So maybe it's been a little bit over-trimmed.
Over-trimmed and H2. Great. And then let's call this a bad hedge, like so. Description needs love, for example. Total gap?
6 meters.
6 meters. Number of trees?
0.
0. Canopy height, base canopy height?
Maybe 70 centimeters, so 0.7.
0.70. Average width?
1 to 2. It's not that bad.
Great. And then average height?
Maybe 1 to 2 as well. Okay,
great. So we've basically then completed that hedge, and then just for completion, let's just arbitrarily, is that the right word? We're going to go over, I mean, I don't think this is actually a hedge. This probably could be deleted. So actually just to show you that, how you delete the hedge, that's actually quite a good thing to show. So I can search for a particular hedge, and I think, he says, need to work out how to delete. Anyway, maybe I'll show you that in a moment. I want to find another hedge. This is bad, and it's actually mapped incorrectly as well, I think. Actually, no, you can see the line very faintly. It's pretty much non-existent, but Megan, feel free to let me know what a moderate hedge might look like. This is in the name of the demo.
Okay, just for the name of the demo, you can't see all of it from the above. So let's assume this is a moderate hedge. We will call this an H3 hedge.
So H3 is in rejuvenated, over trimmed.
No, H3 is still in
Over
over
trimmed.
trim, but it's one that's recoverable.
Perfect. Okay. And then this is moderate. Sorry, I've just realized you've just been looking at the top of my head for the last 10 minutes. Description needs love as well. So total gap.
Maybe give it 2 meters.
2 trees.
2.
2 base canopy height.
Say 0.3. So 30 centimeters before that branching starts.
Yeah.
And let's give it the
width.
same height and width as the other one. So I think between 1 and 2 for the height and width.
Great. Okay, so what we've now done is we've got 3 different hedges. I think this one is definitely a rogue choice of location from me, but at least now when we come onto the advisory report, we should get a bit of a diversity of feedback about those 3 hedges that I've mapped. So what I want to quickly show you now, so that was obviously just with people that have pre-populated their map with the RPA data. And just to show you the deleting bit, I've just remembered where it is. So the deleting bit is if you come in just back one, you can see all the different lines that are currently on this plan, but you can also see the ones that I have mapped. So for example, I can click on this line and delete it if I don't want it there. It looks like there's an overlap. So back on, sorry. Oop. One on device, hedgerow. Yeah, so you can basically choose the line and hit delete. Maybe I need to name it delete. Oh, that's a bit of feedback for Jack, actually. Okay, so yeah, I pulled it delete, and then I should be able to see the name delete. Yeah, there we are. Okay, interesting. So I can then delete the feature. Okay, so what I want to show now is instead of the kind of using that preloaded data that I've got within the is my it's still saying delete on the screen, isn't it? Let me just reshare. That looks like it was my computer had got caught on a particular page. So instead of having to preload the data, what I want to now show is the idea of drawing a new hedge. So instead of using that RPA data, maybe I'm going out on the quad bike, but I'm starting fresh. So I'm going to go, Megan, down this stretch here, which I think is quite a good line of trees, but with some thicker hedges underneath. But instead of using the existing demo map, I can hit the plus, start survey, and now I can basically start a healthy hedgerow survey fresh from the field. So this could be new survey and start. And what that now does is that now allows me to draw new lines rather than using the RPA data, which I can, obviously I'm going to be nice and quick for this one, but I can add the point for that particular stretch and then hit done and then follow the exact same process as before. So I'm going to just, just put in a couple of things. But for the demo, I will make this up. So that's just to show you that you don't need the RPA data to do the hedgerow plan. You can start from scratch and start building those plans by drawing lines, making notes. The final thing I do want to show is you can take a photo. So the photo, I'm currently in quite a boring office, but I do have a nice bookshelf behind me. So I can hit plus and take photos. And what that will show is a bookshelf full of wonderful books. Lots of those I would recommend. Whereby you can upload that photo to your map as well. So I've dropped that, but obviously I'm in a part of Bristol. So you can see on my interactive map, it's dropped that particular photo. But with that photo now on this plan, you can link it to your Healthy Hedgerows template. So you can hit edit and you can hit the link button. And then you can basically say that that photo I've just taken is relevant to my new survey. There we are. We need to maybe have a look at that. But that should allow you to link photos from the plan that you've created to the particular layer that you've made. Okay, so in the name of time, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and move across to the kind of the final bit of the demo, which is the advice. So the advice is built off the plan that I've just created. So I can see on my phone, I'm just double checking whether it has been created or not. And what I should be able to do is refresh my map. And hopefully, if everything has gone to plan, what I can now see is I've got some extra bits populated. The first thing is the photo that I took, you can see is now a little image. So you can see the photo that I've taken is now logged in here. And yeah, you can link, I'm just gonna double check that link plan. That should be just a little bug doing it in the mobile. But what I really want to see is I want to zoom into the extent of my Healthy Hedgerows survey that I've just completed. So obviously I chose some random ones, but you can see that the attributes that me and Megan have just created together are all logged in here. So I've got the good hedge, I've got the moderate hedge, and I've got the a bad hedge. Sorry, bad hedge here, and which one's this one? The moderate hedge here. Okay. So now it's down to the advice, and this is the bit that I'm most excited about. Obviously, I love the mapping, but I think what we're really keen to do is give the user, which is either you, the farmer, or the advisor representing the farmer, the ability to ask the people's trust, what should I do next? You know, I've told you that I've got one bad hedge, one good hedge. How do I help keep that hedge going into the future? And the way that you access that advice is you click the 3 dots next to the hedgerow survey you've completed, so ignoring my new survey, and you go into Toolbox. And within Toolbox, you've got this Healthy Hedgerows Management tool. And it's got a little icon that says, send your hedgerow data to the People's Trust. And in return, they will send you a report for what you should do with those hedges. And so by clicking that, you then met with this pop-up where you have to consent to sending your email address and name with the People's Trust so they can log the hedge for you. You can then optionally tick in for their communication, which I'm obviously going to. They've got great stories to tell. And you do have to let them know that whether you're over 18 or not. And also, if you need their privacy policy, there's a hyperlink to it there. You hit run, and what happens is 2 things are going to happen. Firstly, we're sending the data over to their wonderful database, and I don't know how many different permutations of advice there are, but there's more than just a couple, let's put it that way. And in return, what we're going to be sent is LandApp is going to extract from that database some hedgerow advice based on the data that you've created. So you do need to refresh your screen, and this is the bit that we're just working out how do we improve. And I'm just going to check the status of it. It takes about 15 seconds to run, so I'm not expecting it to be there straight away. And you will receive an email once it's complete. Okay, so we'll refresh my screen. It's just complete now. Email has come in. So the first thing to show you is that on your map, you receive this hedgerow advice point data. And all this does in simple terms is it just drops the point next to each of the hedges that we've assessed and includes some advice about that particular hedge. So for example, the hedge that we called good hedge, the advice is this hedge is good width, providing good habitat for wildlife, brilliant. It looks like there's no significant gaps. So in terms of, you know, if you can get hedges in that state, Megan's going to be extremely happy. Over here, however, let's go moderate first. What I received from the People's Trust is a bit more bespoke advice. So raising the cutting height, frequent healthy stems, etc., etc. I'm not going to read this all out because there's a slightly cleaner report in a moment. And also the bad hedge, lots of work needs to be done. So we basically return for this particular hedge what needs to happen. I'm then basically going to open up my email inbox for you. And what you should receive is also a slightly cleaner version of what's also been shared onto the map. So you receive this joint partnership communication for the different hedges that you've created. So we've got hedgerow advice for moderate, bad, and good hedge. And you can read what the People's Trust are recommending needs to happen. So I won't obviously dive into this too much. But for example, for the moderate one, and I don't know if Megan, you want to talk through any of these, you know, raising the cutting height, rotationally cut them every 2 to 3 years, not every year. Incremental changes for this one, it looks like.
Absolutely. We chose a moderate one that we think can be saved without rejuvenation. So just minor tweaks to the trimming routines.
Perfect. Do you want to talk through the bad hedge very quickly, and then we'll come over to the Q&A?
Absolutely, yeah. So the bad hedge, I deliberately made up a hedge that has been over-trimmed. Now, normally when a hedge gets over-trimmed, they lose quite a lot of their branching density at the base. and this makes them not nearly as good for wildlife. A lot of wildlife needs that base density, and so actually does a lot of our farming. When you've got leggy hedges, they become wind tunnels and they direct the wind right at lamb height, which is very unhelpful. So to really get that hedge back into really good condition, it's likely that hedge would need to be rejuvenated. So we've said either coppicing this one because it's an H2 and not in the best condition, or laying it if there are enough suitable stems. And really that's just because there's an age-old adage when it comes to hedge management, is hedges put on branching growth just below where you cut them. So if you need that branching growth right back down to the base, that's going to have to be where you cut them. So that's coppicing and laying. And then it will give a little bit of information about what to do after that and how you can turn that coppice or that lay into a really decent, dense hedge afterwards. And the replant gaps, of course. So replanting gaps, again, that's an option much better done when you're actually rejuvenating that hedge. It gives those whips a much better chance of survival.
Perfect. Thanks, Megan. And then just the final two things to show you before we Q&A. Firstly, there's a zip file attached to that, particularly if you're assessing hundreds of hedges. We're not going to put them all in the email. I think we show the first 10, and then the rest are all in a nice formatted spreadsheet with the field ID number, what advice is recommended, what the current structure is. And so just download that zip file, and you can either look at it by same advice type, so you can get a list of all the hedges that require the same type of management, or you can look at it by sheet ID number, so what does each field parcel require in terms of hedge management. So really excited about that. And then finally, we have inserted a little hyperlink that allows you to click on show this hedge, and it should on LandApp zoom specifically, he says, into that particular hedge. Let's see if that worked. View hedgerow and LandApp, that should take you to the particular feature. Or maybe the hedgerow needs to be turned on. Okay, interesting. But that is basically a direct link into the feature that has created that particular plan. Let's see it work. Yeah, there we are. Cool, it does work. I just had the map open. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I am going to, Rosie has kindly behind the scenes been speaking a bit about, or helping us with the Q&A, so there's plenty of questions to get through. So we had a question from Fiona via email just around how you can print off a clean kind of hedgerow management plan. The first thing to say is once you've got the hedgerow data on your map, obviously what I would recommend is just focusing on those particular areas that are have been surveyed. We'd obviously love you to survey every hedgerow. If you wanted to show the field parcel ID, what I would recommend doing is just also downloading the field parcel data from the RPA and creating a bit of a styling behindhand. So that could be, for example, making a slightly darker base layer and turning on the labels for those particular field IDs, like so, sheet ID, field ID, and therefore when you go to print it or share it with your team members, you've got the field ID or the field name in a nice print with the hedgerow management advice switched on as labels as well. So for example, you can turn those advisory labels on, which for that one is quite a lot of things to do, whereas for the good one, there was a little bit less to do. So how do you share that with your team? I think the easiest way would either be printing, or remember, you can add people as a collaborator to the map. I could add Megan, I could add my team to that so they can see the results of the survey, but also see the different advisory points as well. So Megan, a question from Mike. Do you like the coppicing of overgrown hedges to allow to regenerate as encouraged by the RPA grants?
I do, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if a hedge has got too big to safely or feasibly lay, one way of doing it would be coppicing it to the ground. And I know it seems like a very dramatic thing to do, and I would absolutely recommend only doing this to a fraction of hedges per year. Generally, no more than 5% of hedges should be rejuvenated at any one year, because it would be a substantial temporary loss to habitat and nesting potential. But when a hedge has become overstood and it's turning into a line of trees, actually you end up having this iterative loss. If you don't do something to rejuvenate it at that point, you're likely to just lose more and more stems, and that will slowly turn into an ever thinning line of trees, and then eventually not a hedge at all. So it is important to intervene. There is a potential to do things alternative to coppicing, so potentially wildlife hedge laying. Depends on what you're comfortable with and how much space you've got, and that makes sure that there's a little bit more of that habitat left there. And of course, the things you can do when you coppice your hedge to mean it's not as dramatic and detrimental. You can use some of that brash that you've taken out of your hedge and make a dead hedge next to, or even on top of, the coppiced hedge to protect that regrowth from browsing. If you are going to do some coppicing, it is really, really important to protect the regrowth, because if that regrowth gets nibbled by hares or deer or rabbits, then that can be the end of that hedge, which is not what we want at all.
Yeah. Thanks, Megan. So a question from Ben. Is the mobile app able to use external GPS antennae to receive more accurate location? Yes, so the Land App Mobile just runs off your device's GPS, which means if you've connected it to a Bluetooth antennae, for example, the accuracy will just be following that antennae. So yeah, we don't dictate the GPS settings, it's your phone that does. So if you connect to an external bit of kit, that will work. A question from Seb to you, Megan. It's about whether the SFI guidance, which states to produce a written hedgerow condition assessment record, and Seb is wondering, do you have to create a hedgerow management plan document as well as completing the survey through Land App Mobile to meet the criteria to get the written record? I think maybe just a bit of clarity about what the evidence required from SFI would be in relation to what we've shown.
The evidence required is the condition assessment, and the idea behind it is that you turn that into a management plan using that condition assessment. But my reading of the SFI requirements is just doing that condition assessment itself, and that next step is what they're wanting you to do, but not necessarily something that they will quiz you on. That's my reading of it. Dan, I hope that's similar to your understanding of that.
I think that's right. I think all they need to know is, are you documenting year on year the condition, and do you have a plan in place to improve them? I don't think it's too much more nuanced than that, although if there's someone on the call that wants to maybe give us a bit more information on that, would be good. Megan, another one from Isabel about whether she can change the management advice, i.e. where she doesn't need to act immediately now, but she wants to kind of ignore the management advice for the next 5 to 8 years. So just a bit more idea of kind of how fixed are you on the advice given, and how much flexibility do people have to kind of make it fit with their own system?
There has to be flexibility on it, absolutely. Just because that's the management advice that we give at that particular time doesn't mean that has to be done there and then. For example, if we had a farm that had a lot of overstood hedges, then the management advice for each one of them would be to lay them or to coppice them or to rejuvenate them. But of course, we absolutely don't want all of that done at one time. So we've got some guidance and advice on our website, and hopefully we're going to be bringing out some more before the end of the year about how to piece all of these individual assessment feedback into a farm scale plan, because that's something that's really very difficult to do, and especially to do it well, there's quite a lot of nuance to understand. But certainly, just because you've got that management, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be done again.
I can hear parental issues. Parental might be needed, so I'm going to do five questions in a row for Land App, just quick fire. So Mike's asked, as an agent, can I download a number of different SBI numbers? Yeah, Mike, providing you've got permission from that landowner and they've given you their SBI number, you can download multiple SBI numbers and run as many as you need. Question from Sarah, how do you download the data if you don't have an SBI number? So there's a number of ways. Obviously, you can draw it yourself. We have had a related question from Ben. There are other data sets out there around hedgerows. So we have got OS field boundaries is now live in the Land App. So that's an Ordnance Survey derived hedgerow, line of trees and fence data set. I don't probably have time to demo it now, but we'll be releasing a video about that soon. But it's a pretty detailed hedgerow assessment that already has height, width, etc. contained within, so it can kind of pre-populate your survey. UKCEH has also got the data, and we have looked at the UKCEH data. Just the only issue we're finding is the height really good, but just the geometry of the shapes follows their land cover map and not the RPA data. So it doesn't quite follow the field boundaries as you would expect, but we have had initial conversations with them about making that possible. So I hope that's useful. So there are basically other data sets you can use if you don't have an SBI number. A question from Adrian: when will we get the OS data layer on the mobile? So Adrian, I think you're referring to the OS base map. We are still working out that route. We basically, at the moment, the mobile is built on our Google base maps because it is got the GPS setting and it also is international. For OS, I'm not sure if we've got a timeline on that, but I'd be keen to know feedback wise how important having OS data on your mobile would be. One thing I didn't touch on is just on the Land app mobile, if you go to the side menu, there is a submit feedback button in your mobile app. And from there, you can directly say, hey, please, can we have some help achieving X or Y? A question for you, Megan, from Gwyn. As someone who worries about how to approach rejuvenation on his own hedge, such as with pied flycatchers, red start, etc., and has seen utter devastation in the name of rejuvenation, do you think the English scheme allows for or encourages that longer term approach, which considers the species present? So it's all about, I guess, the nuance in the management, particularly that rejuvenation.
So, and what the worst thing in the world to a really lovely big hedge, and they all cut that without actually having another hedge to its place for that. Actually, it's one of the tips for all of your hedges.
Oh, Megan, I'm gonna have to interrupt you, Megan. Your signal's completely gone, I think. Apologies, anyone listening. We will just move on from Megan, and while we hopefully can get Megan back, might be worth turning your camera off. A question from Helen, which is about you get paid for assessing each side of the hedge, £5. Can you map both sides? So yeah, you just need to, at the moment, if they're when you're exporting the data, you obviously just need to tag it as either a half hedge or a double hedge. And we've got some guidance coming out on that. So you only need to map the condition once. Obviously, you're looking at that one side. You just need to know which hedge is, okay, I suppose, getting double side of management. But I think there's guidance coming out, if not already out, from Land app on that particular point, Helen. Question from Chris. Is the Healthy Hedge tool available for non-subscribers via normal app, not mobile users? The smallholder, the cost outweigh the benefit. So unfortunately, Chris, at the moment, all the Land app mobile and the Healthy Hedgerows in Land app is within the subscription. It just helps us, cover the cost of the development, which has taken the last 6 months. However, there is still the free Healthy Hedgerows app for farmers to use through People's Trust. It's a slightly simpler, it's a simplified form. So it's less around drawing the lines, less around preloading, but it is still available. So please don't feel like cost is a blocker. What we're trying to do is just help streamline it with other data sets within the Land app as well. A question from Nick McDonald. Good to have you, Nick. Are you hoping to be able to feed back the updated data to the RPA quicker than you can now? Yes, myself and Tim are working behind the scenes to try and get closer to the RPA. We would love to be able to, facilitate a data submission through Land app, and it's, we are having the conversations. Being pragmatic, I just don't know timescale. So answer at the moment is no, but hopefully one day, yeah. Megan, I can see you've arrived. If you want to keep your video off if the Wi-Fi is struggling, please feel free to do so. A good question from Sue saying, I'm a smallholder. Can I claim the survey payments? So is there any limit on the size of farm that can access these payments, Megan?
I think you have to, there's a whole load of eligibility criteria for FIs, and I think probably the best way to go would be to direct to the .gov website and have a look at the whole list of eligibility criteria.
Okay. Yeah, and what we'll do is in our follow-up email, we'll just point towards the SFI guidance, just to make sure people are clear where that is. So I'm conscious it's 1 o'clock. There's definitely some more questions to cover. So I'm happy if Megan, you are to stay on for another 5 minutes, Wi-Fi permitting. But if anyone does need to leave now, please feel free to do so and answer the survey questions on your way out. We'd be extremely grateful because it helps inform both these sessions moving forward, but also our relationship with people like the People's Trust for Endangered Species. A question from Georgina. Megan, what makes a tree a tree?
is a really good question. And on a regularly managed hedgerow, it's quite easy to answer. It's a tree with a canopy that's clear of the rest of the hedgerow, and it's managed differently. So whilst you might trim the hedgerow, you wouldn't trim the hedgerow tree. It gets a little bit more confusing when you've got hedgerows that have grown up fairly big and tall, so that the hedgerow might be approaching the same height as the tree, but it would be the trees that will have been existing there as hedgerow trees before that hedge grew up around it. So there is a description on the app, but it can be confusing, particularly for the larger sized hedgerow structures. Much easier for the small ones. They don't have to be big, great oak trees. They can be a hawthorn that's been left to grow up and act like a hedgerow tree. So it doesn't, there is no sort of species delimitation for this. It's much more about, are we managing it separately from the hedge around it?
Great, thanks, Megan. So a question from Vicky to Land App. Just to confirm, can you draw new hedges on the initial plan, or do you need to, create a new plan to draw the initial one? Yeah, perhaps my demo didn't explain that. So if there is a gap in the RPA data or things need to be amended, you can do it in the original plan. You can draw new lines. You don't need to create a new survey to add new lines to that particular plan. So it should be flexible. You should only need one layer, one plan. And you can edit that, add new lines, delete lines, etc. A question from Sue. Is the idea to undertake this survey in a physical field, or will various advisors be doing it in the office? I'll answer half of that and then come over to Megan, which we definitely want people to be doing this in the field. The whole point of this is to try and get people outdoors looking at their hedges, using the app rather than trying to do it through desktop. We've actually limited, you can't edit the hedgerow survey on your desktop. You have to do it through the mobile app at the moment. And that's purely because we want people to be doing it out in the field. So have you got anything to add on that one, Megan?
Yeah, exactly that, really. That actually being out in the field, looking at your hedges, especially in winter when you can see the sort of bare bones of them, it's amazing what we might have missed before you actually go out and really have a good look. So I think definitely there's much more value going out and physically looking and doing the survey in the field.
Yeah, perfect. So a good question from Martin Steer. Well, actually, it's two questions from Martin. I think we can take both of them. So one of them is, once you've done the survey and split your hedges and added unmapped ones, etc., can you copy them to an RLE1 template to update the RPA system? Yeah, so Martin, just to show you, this is obviously the output that we've just completed. I can select those hedges that I've just mapped by holding Shift on my keyboard, or I can select them all by obviously just copy them all over. I think it was one of these, wasn't it? And then I can copy them to an RLE1 plan. So we've got the RLE1 form template, RLE1 new hedges, and then that can be used as evidence for your RLE1 application with the RPA. So it's just focusing the effort on where the new hedges are based on your survey output. And then also, Martin, a question actually that we keep getting asked, Megan, and this is probably one for us to take away, is can you export a previous Healthy Hedgerows survey that's been done on the PTES Natural Aptitude app and upload it to Land App? I think the answer to that at the moment is no, but it's something that we can have a discussion about, perhaps offline.
Dan, can I come back to that question that I lost internet for about habitats and rejuvenation?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
What I wanted to say is that when we put all of our hedgerows in a rotational management, it means when we're taking one mature hedgerow away through rejuvenation, it's likely that others will be filling its place. Now, what we can do if we know we've got exemplary habitat that's being used by some rare species is we can make sure that we preempt rejuvenation of that habitat by creating that elsewhere. So if we are going to say lay a hedgerow that's big and wonderful and providing lots for wildlife, then maybe what we'd think about doing in the previous 5 years is actually letting up some of the hedgerows either side to make sure that when we do rejuvenate that hedge, which is an inevitable, those hedges will lost, that actually we've got plenty of habitat either side or in the very local vicinity for things to move into and take that mantle. So, and the best part about having all of your hedges in that rejuvenation cycle is that actually you'll have hedges of every density, size, shape, and maturity. And that's what wildlife likes the most, is actually that wonderful diversity of structure and maturity and shape and style. So it is very possible. It will take a bit of a head scratch when it comes to piecing it all together at a farm scale and creating that farm scale management plan, but that is what we are aiming to do.
Okay, thanks, Megan. So there's so many questions coming through. I think there's maybe a category of questions that I can see to the People's Trust, which is people have just seem really interested to learn more, general advice on what People's Trust offer, difference, about rejuvenation, about estimated carbon stock. So Megan, maybe more of a general question to you is where can the everyone go to find more information about hedgerows, hedgerow management, and is there anything we can add to the follow-up email for you?
Absolutely. So we've got loads of web pages about hedgerows and hedgerow management. I think probably the ones that are most relevant are on our website, hedgerowsurvey.ptes.org. And there's a whole section on the different options for hedgerow management, the different options of how to establish new hedgerow trees. And we're creating new resources all the time. I've constantly got a list of new infographics and illustrations that I'm trying to get created and added to this website. So I would head there. My email address, Dan, I'm very happy for you to share my email address with everyone that's come to this webinar, if anyone wants to contact me directly. And I do quite a lot of workshops as well. So I spend all of my winter months traveling around the country, going to lots of different farm cluster groups, doing tailored hedgerow management workshop days. So if anybody is in part of a cluster group and would like to have a workshop where you'll learn pretty much everything hedge in one day, then do give me a shout.
Right. Rosie, if we could just make a note for the follow-up email for everyone to just include at least the website and Megan's contact information as well. So we're going to just come to a close. There's a couple of questions that I can probably answer quite quickly. So just, I think the main one was there was one question about yearly reminders on Land App to take a survey. It's something we've been discussing. We don't currently do it. However, it's a really nice idea. There's certain times of the year you need to declare things. So it's something we're thinking about. How do you handle roadside hedges? So again, we'll point you to some guidance that we're just creating, but you can map roadside hedges, but you're only claiming for half the hedge, remember, I believe. That's right. And then you've made a good point around the RPA import sometimes brings hedgerows that are on top of each other that are identical, and they're kind of identical shape, identical geometry. We will be soon releasing a tool that allows you to clean that hedgerow. We are aware of it, and it's data hosted on the RPA side, not the Land App, but we're just working out how we can clean it before it's arriving, just to make sure that the total length, for example, numbers are more accurate. And with the SFI application, entering total length payment, does the survey need to take place beforehand? Probably more of a question to Megan. Maybe we finish on that. I guess when you apply for SFI, you don't need to complete the assessment. It's all about applying first and then completing afterwards. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's a bit of a disjunct really, because you might have a slightly different length of hedgerow once you've done your survey than what was put in the application. I'm hoping that some of those creases in the SFIs will be ironed out.
Perfect. Just in the name of time, I'm going to have to call the webinar to the end. Thank you all so much. There is lots of questions that are still unanswered, so I will work with Megan to try and categorize them and answer them, and we will share the answers either through a web page or through an email. Recording will be up on YouTube on Monday. Thank you all so much for staying. Still over 100 of you on the call, so hopefully it's been of use to you. And please go and assess the hedgerow winter time before the vegetation comes back. And good luck. Thanks for your time.